The gospel for this weekend is one that is often used when talking and promoting priestly vocations and vocations to the consecrated life. In the gospel, Jesus sends out the 72. He gives them authority, he tells them to teach. But Jesus says this, and this is the often quoted line for vocation promotion. The harvest is abundant, but the laborers are few. So pray, therefore, the master of the harvest to send out more laborers for the harvest. Ask the master of the harvest to send out more laborers. That's the cry that we, as the people of God, continue to make as we pray for priestly vocations and vocations to the consecrated life. Now, as a pastor, I've noticed in my own intercessory prayer, especially too, I include a petition at daily mass for vocations to the priesthood and consecrated life. And one of the ways that I've done that, or a petition I've added to it, has been to pray that God would raise up from within our parish vocations to the priesthood and consecrated life. Now, I know that God has indeed raised up vocations, yes, that there were a handful of people over the years that have entered the seminary, have joined religious life as a brother or as a sister. And my understanding is one person from our parish is in a religious community right now, persevering in that vocation. And so that's my prayer, though, that God will continue to raise up vocations to the priesthood and consecrated life from our parish. I was invited by the Office of Vocations for our diocese a few months ago to give a formation session to the men who were in the propedeutic year. That's the first year of formation, the initial year as they enter into the discernment process, and they live in community, they pray in community, they study together, and all of that. Now, the purpose of my formation session, scheduled a few months ago, that took place just a few weeks ago in the month of June, they were going off to Guadalupe in Mexico City to this shrine of Our Lady, and they were coming back, and so they wanted me to sit down and to process the experience of pilgrimage with them and just to talk a little bit about Mary and the life of a seminarian and a priest, etc. Lots of casual conversation took place, especially over dinner before I gave my presentation to them. And as they went around and introduced themselves, one of them indicated that they were from the parish of St. Clare in Wrightstown. One of the things about St. Clare's in Wrightstown, now it's a town of 3,600 people, but they have 3 men who are in the formation process, who are studying to become priests, who are answering God's call right now. 3 people, all within the same relative time frame of the last few years. I don't know. I asked the young man, I said, well, what's in the water there that everybody, a lot of people are discerning priesthood? He cited the example of their pastor, and, I just think that's a great credit to that faith community. The fact that by their prayers, by their life of prayer and spirituality, that they've raised up those vocations to the priesthood. When I was away last weekend, I was in Oklahoma City and in Wichita, and I was really learning about 2 saintly priests. One of them was named Father Emil Capon, who is a venerable on the way to sainthood, and the other in Oklahoma City was Blessed Stanley Rother. I've had a desire for a long time to visit the Blessed Stanley Rother Shrine, and I learned a lot about Blessed Stanley Rother. Even though I've read a biography, I still learned more things about him and his life and ministry. Blessed Stanley Rother was ordained, I'm going to guess, maybe in the 60s for the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City. And one of the popular things of dioceses, and still a little bit today, is that the Holy Father had asked dioceses to send a priest to the foreign missions and to establish a mission church in, Central America or somewhere. So a lot of dioceses did Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador. So Stanley Rother serves a few years in Oklahoma City, and then he says, I'd like to go to the missions. And he takes an assignment in Guatemala in a little village, Santiago Atitlan, and he goes and he serves the people. Now, when it comes to priestly vocations, this little village of Santiago Atitlan hadn't had a priest in centuries, risen up from their parish. They hadn't raised up vocations. And so Blessed Stanley Rother goes there, he serves them, celebrates Mass, he works among them, does a lot of great work, saintly work. There's a lot of animosity in Guatemala in the 1980s towards individuals of Christianity, Catholicism, and Blessed Stanley Rother fell victim to that. That one night as he was in his rectory, these gunmen broke into his rectory and shot him dead in the living room. The bullet holes are still there. You can see them still today. What happened after Blessed Stanley Rother was shockingly martyred was that young men from that village began discerning priesthood. And since the time of Blessed Stanley Rother, the little parish of Santiago Atitlan has produced 5 or 6 different priestly vocations. Blessed Stanley Rother, when he was martyred, they left his heart in Guatemala, and then he was buried in the parish cemetery in Okarche in Oklahoma. Of course, having a martyr, one who died out of odium fidei, hatred of the faith, a cause, people begin talking about his holiness, his saintliness, and Stanley Rother is quickly advanced on the cause of sainthood and was beatified back in 2017. But his story, a heroic priest whose example in life raised up vocations, inspiring people in Guatemala and surely people in Oklahoma City as well. To have vocations come from within our own communities. That's what I pray for in my parish that I'm serving at now. And I still pray for my parishes that I served in Brussels, Lincoln, and Rosaire, that the work that I began there, that maybe some of those young people might discern priesthood. My sense is, from my service here in Shawano, is that God is calling. And I won't be surprised when in 2 or 3 years from now, seminarians begin coming out of Sacred Heart Parish in Shawano. My sense also is that we have a lot of young youth, middle school, elementary school, that God could indeed be calling to the priesthood. But it's going to take years for them to begin that process of formation, to go off to the seminary. But I believe God is calling. I sense it. I recognize it. The Lord wants there to be priests. He wants the sacraments to be celebrated. One of the things that really struck me as I was down in Oklahoma City was the line for confession at the shrine of Blessed Stanley Rother. 12, 2 dozen deep. People longing for the sacraments, how we need priests to provide the Eucharist, to provide absolution, to walk with us as we draw closer to the Lord our God. The words of Jesus in our gospel this weekend. Ask the master of the harvest to send out laborers for his harvest. Let us all agree on this in prayer. And as we pray, well, let us wait and see what God does in the years ahead.